Welcome to these Adelaide by Mid-City mini reviews, the webinar series. My name is Yvette van Eenennaam. I'm the General Manager of Adelaide by Mid-City, the Health and Medical Innovation District here in the heart of Adelaide. And I'm also pleased to be the chair of today's webinar. Before I introduce the first speaker, I would like to acknowledge the Kaurna people, the original custodians of the land we meet on today. And I'd like to pay my respect to elders, both past, present, and future. So these short weekly webinars are organized to encourage further cross-disciplinary collaboration and collaboration locally, nationally, globally between researchers, industry and clinicians and all health professionals, and also to further develop our vibrant innovation ecosystem. So welcome all. So this afternoon, we're very fortunate to have two great speakers. First, Stephen Blakeney from Flinders University and the Medical Device Partnering Program. His co-presenter, Olivia Ward, unfortunately is an apology for today. We also have Dr. Andrew Cunningham from the University of South Australia and the Australian Research Centre for Interactive and Virtual Environments. So Stefan presents today. He's an innovation manager at a MDPP, Medical Device Partnering Program, and a guest lecturer at Flinders University for the topic of innovation in medical devices, and is also a member of the steering committee of the Bridge Tech program. So has many roles, and I'm very looking forward to his presentation. I'd like to hand over to you, Stefan.
Thank you, Yvette. I'll just kick off with, so many people in South Australia will have heard of the Medical Device Partnering Program. I think it can be a little confusing exactly because we have grown in as a program over the 13 years that we've been running. So one of the things I really wanted to highlight today is both the Ideas Incubator and the venture partnerships. So I'll start with the venture partnerships. We have been very fortunate to have a really good relationship with MTP Connect, which is the Federal Government Growth Centre for MedTech and Pharmaceuticals. And through that, we have been a venture partner on a few of their programs, particularly in the area of grant funding. So both the Biomedical Translation Bridge program and the Targeted Translation Research Accelerator are two of the programs that we're involved in, and we handle the medtech stream of both of those programs. And I think Andrew Milligan I saw popped up as one of the attendees today. He's our representative for BTB. That's a $22.3 million initiative providing up to $1 million in matched funding for research translation. So new therapies, technologies and medical devices, taking them through to sort of the proof of concept stage. The other program that we're involved in, so I should say actually BTB is fully allocated now. So at the moment of at this present time, there may be some more funding at some point, I'm not too sure. In terms of the Targeted Translation Research Accelerator, that's managed by Olivia White, who unfortunately isn't able to join us today. That's a $47 million initiative, and that includes setting up some research centres, so not all that money goes towards grant funding, but they have just closed their first round or awarded their first round. So there were 8 applicants, in total $5.2 million was awarded. Both Nurtec and the University of Sydney will both medical device projects, so they'll be managed through MDPP and will provide some ongoing support. And these are the projects you can see listed on the screen. I won't go into the detail. There is a press release if anyone's interested in learning more. I won't go through and sort of explain in too much detail, but all interesting projects. And most importantly, and something we really, really want to encourage because we want to see South Australia represented in the round 2 awardees. So round 2 priority areas have now been announced. So atherosclerosis, including cerebrovascular disease, cardiomyopathy and heart failure, both obesity and mental health as they relate to diabetes, and glucose control for both type 1 or type 2 or double diabetes or gestational diabetes. So if you're working on research and sort of at the research translation stage and you fit into any of those categories, please consider applying to this program. Applications close on the 4th of November at 3:30 p.m. our time. There's also an information session a week today on the 12th of October. And Olivia White here at Flinders is a great resource. So if you have any questions, if you're not sure whether you please feel free to contact her on the email address on the screen. She'll be more than happy to help. So then just moving back, so the Ideas Incubator is really what we've become well known for, and that's really the part of MDPP that has been running for 13 years. So this just lists some of our partners on there, but I'll just explain in a little bit more detail how the program works. So as I mentioned, it's been running for 13 years. We've done in that time over 100 projects, and we've recently been picking out some statistics, and companies that we've supported just over the last 3 years alone have raised more than $18 million. So we've assessed 700 ideas in that time, and really what we look for when people present their ideas to us, they can come from clinicians or researchers, or sometimes from startups. We have a process that we've worked through for this the 13 years that's become very sort of proven itself to be a really good formula for helping to achieve success. So we do some initial due diligence and screening to get those 700 ideas down to sort of 10 or 15 projects that we take to a workshop. And a workshop's where we get experts, so we can't be experts in all areas. So this is really our chance to both connect the applicant with experts in a specific area. So these are tailor-made to each individual project that we see. So this could be experts in cancer biology, it could be surgeons or patent attorneys, regulatory consultants, anyone we really think that the project is going to need sort of in the sort of short to medium term to be able to be successful. Next, we move into a decision-making stage. So we have an independent assessment panel made up of experts who provide both advice and guidance to us and the applicants, and ultimately decide what projects we're able to do through the Medical Device Partnering Program Ideas Incubator. We then, for those successful applicants, they pay $5,000 as a co-contribution to join the program. And we help them by developing a solution or doing some technical work with them, really so it's 250 hours of technical development, and we do a 30-hour market report. Any of the intellectual property generated during that project belongs to the applicant. We hand everything over. Often there could be something that is patentable in that. But what we're trying to do is help early stage companies to develop a solution, and we recognize that at that stage there's not a lot of support, and we don't want to start taking equity or taking too much of a stake in what they're developing. We really want to do short projects to help them to develop. At the end of the project, we hand over all of the technical files, everything that we've developed we'll hand over. So if it's a proof of concept device, we'll hand over all the CAD files, and that'll be their property. We're also very proud of the fact that we did win the Science Excellence Award last year in the category of industry collaboration in recognition of our 13 years in South Australia. So Yvette, please jump in if I run out of time. I've got a few case studies here that I'll go through as quickly as possible. So one project that we ran in combination with both the Australian National Fabrication Facility site up at Moreton Lakes, and UniSA researchers, and here with the Medical Device Partnering Program engineers, was to develop or help to develop what researchers at UniSA had been developing in terms of a biomarker sensor for a couple of biomarkers related to preeclampsia. They'd done a lot of work. They were experts in sort of the microfluidics and the electronics of the sensor. What we did was build them a benchtop unit to read out those signals. We also did, as part of that 30-hour market report, spoke to experts in preeclampsia from all around Australia, provided a couple of reports to help them to commercialize. So they spun out a company after doing the MDPP project called Sanguis Diagnostics, and currently running clinical trials. We're also working with a surgeon called Dr. Jonathan Cabot, who is working on a knee balancer project. So we actually originally developed a knee balancing sensor that would measure the spread of force. This is prior to making a cut to insert a knee replacement. We've actually gone on to do some more development with this, as they were working with an interstate company, despite the fact that this was a South Australian innovation, but they didn't have great success over there. So he's actually come back to continue working with us. So we're doing some more work on that. This was a project for Amanda, who is a dental hygienist. She was importing mouthguards. Essentially, she found 2 mouthguards she really liked for different reasons. But what she really wanted was a combination of the 2, because she recognized that firstly, children with braces are very poorly supported, and generally what they need is a custom-made mouthguard, which is expensive, and as their teeth are changing regularly, it's not always feasible for patients. So she developed this she developed this mouthguard with the help of material scientists here at Flinders, supported through our program. She's currently doing some mechanical testing. She has launched this in dental practices. She's also had Angela Foley from the Adelaide Crows randomly popped up as having used one of the mouthguards and really liked it. So she's now involved, and she's produced a great video for explaining how to fit the mouthguard. Maxim Skate is another project that we've worked on that has recently received TGA approval. That's a rehabilitation device for post-knee replacement. EBeam, another South Australian company. This device helps when you're placing a distal screw in for example, a femoral nail, and saves the surgeon having to do x-rays. They're selling this device into 29 countries now. We've been involved in version 2 and now version 3 to help them to do some continuing ongoing development. And finally, I thought I'd just chuck this one in quickly at the end as well. So this was again a South Australian company who developed EBeam irradiation, and we did some testing with environmental test lab here, so proving the efficacy of the device. And they've recently, so just back in July, they just raised just over $500,000 from the South Australian government through the Research Commercialisation and Startup Fund. So hopefully that was to time. I have to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Stefan, for this fantastic presentation and really providing a glimpse of what MDP Connect can do and how you can support our researchers, clinicians and students to transform their ideas into new products and services and really allow them to bring that change to our local community and global community. Please feel free if another question arises later on to ask it, and we can always propose it to Stefan at the end of this session. So thank you, Stefan. It's good to get a quick glimpse, and everybody is invited to reach out for further questions, or if you want to discuss bringing your idea to life, don't hesitate to contact Stefan for that. Then I would like to introduce our next speaker. It's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Andrew Cunningham from the University of South Australia and Australian Research Centre for Interactive and Virtual Environments, the IVE, I believe. Andrew's research really aims to help people understand the data in the world around them and using technologies to, such as virtual and augmented reality, to explore how we visualize information in these environments. And Andrew also worked in the Australian game industry on titles that have been downloaded more than 50 million times, I've heard. So that's probably quite impressive. I'm not from the game industry, but I understand it's quite impressive. But I returned to research in around 2016 and was a key researcher in a narrative visualization project with the Data to Decision Corporation Research Centre. And this project won the South Australian Information Industry Association Award for R&D, Project of the Year. So that's really an award on national level. So please, Andrew, feel free to start your presentation.
Good afternoon. So I'd just like to begin by acknowledging the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians of the land from which I'm presenting today, and pay respects to the elders past and present. So today I'm going to be talking about immersive analytics, and in particular novel approaches to visualizing big data. So a bit of a different presentation where hopefully I can get you excited and thinking about how you can use immersive analytics, and in particular virtual reality and augmented reality, to understand problems in your data and find new insights in that particular data. And so as Yvette said, I'm Dr. Andrew Cunningham. I'm a lecturer and a researcher at the Australian Centre for Interactive and Virtual Environments at UniSA. And so I just have to do a quick plug for IVE, for the centre. So we are one of the largest concentrations of augmented reality and virtual reality researchers within Australia. And I think we're kind of special because with this unique alignment of computer science and health science researchers, architecture researchers, art and design researchers as well. So we cross all these disciplines together to kind of answer problems from a different approach. So not just a computer science approach, which is my background, but also understanding the human element, the design element, understanding how we can make people's lives better using these technologies. So I guess the big problem I want to talk about today is about data. So it's this general problem about data being everywhere all of the time. And when we talk about big data, we really think about this volume and variety of data. So we might have sensors on our bodies, such as our watches are collecting health data about us. We have businesses, servers, and data centers collecting lots of population level data at a huge amount of volume. And we have social networks and transportation networks and so forth. And the question arises, how do we make sense of this type of data? And often the answer that is proposed is by using artificial intelligence or machine learning algorithms and so forth to tell us what the data means. And when visualization comes in, people tend to think about visualization as this big dashboard where we have a green light that tells us that our data is good and a red light that tells us that our data is bad. That's kind of one approach that some people like to imagine when they think about visualization. But I think visualization can provide you a deeper level of understanding of that particular data. And just to illustrate that, I just want to bring up Anscombe's quartet, which is a historical data set from 1973 that illustrates a problem of just looking at statistical properties of data. So in it, we have 4 data sets, and these 4 data sets all have the same statistical properties. So they all add up to the same amount and they all average and have the same standard deviation. But if we actually do a really simple visualization of those data sets, we see that each of the data sets tell a vastly different story. So some of them will highlight outliers, some of them have certain patterns and trends that just aren't obvious if we look at the high-level statistical properties of those data sets. One of my favorite examples of this is work out of Autodesk Research that really hammers home the point. All these images have the same statistical properties, as you can see on the right, but if you visualize them in a scatter plot, immediately you can see that there's vastly different things, including a dinosaur in one of the frames. So this is why I think visualization at a base level is really good for sanity checks. If we externalize the data and actually look at it and use human perception, then we can do these very quick sanity checks and understand what the data is telling us. But for me, the interest in visualizing data is really in this, what's called a human in the loop systems or problems. And this is where you're using human judgment to supervise some sort of system, including algorithms, statistical models, and so forth, to provide status updates to the human in this loop. So the human understands the goals, constraints, and can use their human insight to guide that particular system. These are the kind of problems and the systems that we're really interested in at IVE. And how we like to apply these is in these immersive environments. So this is, some of you might recognize this as a cave system. This is the cave out at Monash, worth $1.8 million to let people stand around and visualize their data in what is quite a nice image. But these sort of cave systems have their problems. They're expensive. They obviously take a lot of maintenance. And it's questionable how much value you can get out of them versus the investment. You know, they're not available for the standard company out there. So what we propose with Immersive Analytics is that you can use the consumer virtual reality and augmented reality hardware that's out there now these days for a fraction of the cost to immerse yourself in that particular data set. Using and actually then you interact with that data rather than spending $1.8 million in a cave. And so this is the motivation behind Immersive Analytics. It has kind of 3 properties that I like to focus on. The first is called space to think. So rather than being restricted to a small desktop monitor or a tablet screen, you actually have all the space around you to visualize and interact with your data and understand what it's telling you and lay out your insights as you see fit, just as you might lay out your documents on your desk. So that's kind of one of the key values of Immersive Analytics. Second is depth perception. So obviously once you have a stereo headset on, like these virtual reality headsets, you can see your data in 3D, which is nice. But I think the key insight, the key value is this idea of embodiment. So once you can touch and interact with your data directly rather than indirectly through a mouse and keyboard, you can potentially gain new or different insights than you would traditionally on a desktop system. And so one of the key examples of Immersive Analytics was this project called Imaxes that we developed with Monash University. And this system really demonstrates all these properties of space to think, embodiment, and directly interacting with your system, with your data. So the data you can see here is just a generic data set of, I believe this is a wine data set. This could be any type of data that you're dealing with. And each of the data dimensions are represented in space as these physical axes that you can grab and manipulate. And you can see the user doing this here. So one of the key things you can do is you can hold a particular dimension of your data up to the data set and visualize the correlation between one dimension and another, for example, in this really quite fluid interaction in this virtual reality environment. So I think this is a really nice example of how we can use this space to think and embodied interactions to start building, to start letting users explore and gain new insights into their data. So as another example, the user can grab a couple of axes and actually generate new types of visualizations in the system, which you can see here. So you can build scatter plots, parallel connected plots, depending on how you hold them, to really immerse yourself in the data and explore that data set in an exploratory way rather than a prescriptive way. This was an early system that we built in collaboration with Monash, and we went on to evaluate it with Monash and University of Maryland in the US. And what we did is we ran a user study with these systems with macroeconomists. And one of the nice findings that came out of this was that there was evidence to say that these are really good systems for doing data storytelling. So actually explaining what the data is telling us to someone else. So if you're a data analyst, how do you communicate what the data is telling to executives or other people who don't generally understand some of these complex insights in the data? Well, it turns out that virtual reality might be a good way of doing that, because you can actually grab and point to things in these virtual environments. This was a follow-up project that we did with Monash of actually creating these embodied axes that we called them, which are physical axes in space that you can grab. So rather than just being virtual, we have the user wear an augmented reality headset, which actually adds information into the real world. And then we built this physical sliders to actually interact with the data. You can see the view here. This is some volumetric data of a head scan, and the user can actually see that in their 3D space and interact with it using those physical sliders. So this is where we start to see some of these more advanced technologies like augmented reality actually support understanding these complex volumetric data in a really easy to interact with and understandable way. And lastly, I'll just point to this work that we're doing with minerals exploration CRC, MinEx CRC. And this is really pushing this idea of augmented reality in something called situated analytics. So once you have data attached to the physical world, you can represent that data in the physical world using these augmented reality headsets. So here in this image, we have what's called a drill core sample, which is drilled out of the ground. It contains lots of rocks essentially that get analyzed by geoscientists, and they have to understand what it's actually telling them. Well, what we can do is, instead of having the geoscientist have a laptop next to them and try to understand what the laptop's telling them and then looking at the rocks, we can actually situate that data and integrate it within the view itself. So there's a really nice example here, I think, where you can see those kind of chemical analysis that commonly happens for geoscientists, but you can also You also get to see what's called a magic lens. So this lets you actually visualize some other data overlaid over the top. In this case, a mock-up of spectral imagery is added to the top. So you can actually do this, what we call a magic lens technique. So I think this is a really exciting direction. And this is the future for immersive analytics, is these augmented reality headsets, because they support collaboration. So if we're working together, I can see you, you can see me, but we can also integrate data within the real world here. So just to summarize, I guess takeaways, I think visualization enables these human in the loop decision making. So these more complex problems than just yes or no sort of answers. Immersive analytics is all about this space to think, direct interaction, and it supports this idea of data storytelling, so being able to explain your insights. And lastly, I guess if you have any interesting data sets, please feel free to reach out to me because we're, as computer scientists and as visualization people, we really love to look at data and try to find new insights within data using these novel technologies such as virtual reality and augmented reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for sharing these opportunities. They are these emerging technologies and how it can potentially be further integrated into our sector. There are two questions I'd like to raise. And the first one is around what would you be the real life examples in the healthcare space, maybe the more clinical space, where this kind of technology is already applied, close to the clinicians, close to the patient? Are there any examples of that, or in that translational research area?
Yeah, so in terms of actually clinically applied, we do have some projects looking at how you can use augmented reality to guide a clinician in administering certain techniques to a patient. So the example that we have, well, that it's an early project, but it's looking at how you can apply certain types of brain stimulation tools to a patient's cranium. So that's one example. I think the other examples would be just these technologies we're seeing uptake in terms of teaching, and we could imagine that you could be taught new clinical approaches or be taught clinical approaches using virtual reality. And then you could also be taught using augmented reality, where it would actually point to where you should apply things, what you should do next, and guide you through those systems. I think that's probably the next step for these technologies is in training. And yeah.
You ended nicely with, if you have interesting data sets, what are the criteria for interesting for you to start exploring the opportunities?
If you have some sort of data set such as basic comma separated value data sets, we can actually drop that into some of our tools right now and visualize it. So that Imaxes tool that you saw earlier is actually open sourced, and you can download it, or I'm happy to drop your data set into that tool and see what it looks like just in virtual reality. And then it becomes a question of, well, now once you have that data in virtual reality, what kind of insights do you need specific to that data set? Because I think every data set and every problem space is different. So then we could start to look at maybe there's some unique visualizations that support your understanding that we haven't thought of. So yeah, definitely if you have basic data sets like comma separated values or anything like that, that's something that we can drop into our tools straight away and start looking at.
Thank you. So I would like to thank both speakers for their presentations and taking some time for questions as well. Next Tuesday, we have another mini webinar review, and that's about summary on clinical registries. Cindy Turner talking about the capabilities of the CQRs, and Associate Professor Maria Ignacio talking about the registry of senior Australians, and also talking about the big data and how to inform improvements in aged care. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you again, the speakers, for presenting today.